Lawrence Reed had no business being on the streets given his violent criminal history and his pending criminal cases.
This is a story that is going to get you angry. A 26-year-old woman has just been identified as the victim who was set on fire in a horrific random attack on a Chicago train. As Bethany MaGee fights for her life, the suspect, Lawrence Reed, remains behind bars, at least for now, a man with dozens of prior arrests who is out on pre-trial release for another violent crime. We have learned new details about his apparent extensive criminal history, and we are going to break it all down with a Chicago trial attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Real quick, before we jump into all this, 180, but affects, everybody. Open enrollment is happening again. You know what that is, comparing the exploitative premiums, the fine print of health insurance. It is chaos. It is chaos. Here's the good news. Crowd Health, our sponsor, they're different. Why? Crowd Health's members, they fund each other's bills directly. This is a real thing. If something big happens, you pay the first $500, the crowd funds the rest. They have a track record of handling major events, including bills over $1 million, which gives you the confidence that you need. Plus, you get access to low-cost prescriptions, testing, high-quality doctors. And look, with ACA subsidies expiring, premiums, they're going to skyrocket. And so far, members have saved over $40 million. So this open enrollment, take your power back. Join Crowd Health to get started today for $99 for your first 3 months using code SIDEBAR at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. You can opt out, but this is how we win. Joincrowdhealth.com. I'm not going to lie to you. I am pissed. I am pissed, okay? I don't usually say this, but this is a case where I'm going to have an attorney on in a minute to try to explain it to me because I don't understand. I don't understand how this happened, and I don't understand how the person who is accused of committing this heinous attack was out, okay? We are tracking this case out of Chicago on a Blue Line train that is just as horrifying as it is baffling, as it is frustrating. A 26-year-old woman, Bethany MaGee, was just riding home. She was minding her own business. She was looking at her phone, and in an instant, her life was changed forever for seemingly no reason, when a stranger poured gasoline on her and set her on fire in a completely unprovoked alleged attack. She was engulfed in flames for over a minute. And the criminal complaint, when you read this, it lays out the chilling, premeditated steps that her alleged attacker, Lawrence Reed, that ones that he apparently took, and it was all caught, you guessed it, on tape. Just 20 minutes before this apparent ambush, surveillance video allegedly shows him at a gas station, appearing to pay the cashier and then pumping gasoline into a bottle. And what makes this tragedy so infuriating is that it was likely preventable, if this is all true. At a press conference, a federal agent revealed that this suspect was a known danger.
Lawrence Reed had no business being on the streets given his violent criminal history and his pending criminal cases. Reed had plenty of second chances by the criminal justice system, and as a result, you have an innocent victim in the hospital fighting for her life.
Now, we've obtained and we've gone through the entire federal criminal complaint. We're going to break down exactly how this attack unfolded minute by minute. We've also dug into that lengthy criminal history, the number of prior arrests, the chances that this guy was apparently given. It angers me. Again, it angers me. It's angering a lot of people out there. I think it's going to stun you when you hear about this. So again, I'm going to have an attorney on to try to make sense of this. This all began with a purchase at a convenience store. According to the federal criminal complaint, at 9:03 p.m. on November 17th, surveillance cameras at a Chicago Citgo gas station captured 50-year-old Lawrence Reed. He walked in, appeared to pay a cashier, and then took a small bottle to a pump and filled it with gasoline. 20 minutes later, the scene shifted to underground. A CTA Blue Line train was pulling towards the Clark and Lake station, and on board was 26-year-old Bethany MaGee. She was seated, scrolling through her phone, her back to the rest of the car, and what you are about to see are the actual surveillance images from inside that train. This was filed in the United States District Court. Yes, we're talking a federal charge here, charged with one count of committing a terrorist attack or other violence against a mass transportation system in the Northern District of Illinois. We are going to talk about that charge. But going back to the evidence here, go back to the photos, They purportedly show the attack unfolding in horrifying real-time progression. Unbeknownst to Bethany, Lawrence Reed was also on that train, standing at the far end of the same car, and according to the complaint, bottle in hand, he allegedly walked directly toward her. And without a word, he allegedly took the cap off and doused her head and body in gasoline. When he seemingly tried to light her on fire, Bethany fought back, fleeing to the front of the train car. Reed allegedly chases her, lit the bottle itself on fire as she ran to the back. He closed in again, and this time he allegedly used the flaming bottle to set her completely ablaze. He then apparently stood and watched as she became engulfed in flames. And when the doors opened at the station, a burning Bethany stumbled onto the platform and collapsed. It was only then that bystanders rushed to help, finally smothering the flames. First responders rushed her to the hospital. Severe, life-threatening burns. Reed, meanwhile, apparently simply stepped off the train and walked away. He was arrested on Tuesday, November 18th. And the very next day, on November 19th, that is when Reed made his initial court appearance. And according to the court order, Reed repeatedly refused an attorney, stated his intention to plead guilty. The judge had to explain that she would not accept a plea at this time. And based on the government's oral motion, the judge scheduled a formal detention hearing. The following day, Thursday, November 20th, prosecutors filed their formal motion for detention, laying out their argument that Reed was far too dangerous to be released. The court thankfully agreed, ordering him detained, stating that no conditions would ensure the community's safety. And look, to be clear, I say this, I'm an attorney. He's innocent until proven guilty. But when we go through this evidence, it is strong evidence, okay? The backbone of this entire case is the federal criminal complaint. It is a 13-page document that lays out the government's evidence in meticulous, and I will tell you, often disturbing detail. I want to go through some of the key passages that form the core of this case. So first, the complaint establishes the alleged premeditation. It states that just 20 minutes before the attack, surveillance video shows the suspect at a gas station. And let me read directly from the document. Quote, Reed arrived at the sit-go wearing the same clothing as he wore when he lit victim A on fire about 20 minutes later. Additionally, Reed entered the convenience store attached to the gas station, appeared to make a payment to the cashier, and then relocated to a gas pump and filled a small container with gasoline. Now, let's look at the attack itself, because the complaint describes the moments inside that train car with chilling clarity. It reads, Reed stood up from his seat while holding a bottle, walked through the car, and approached victim A, who was seated with her back towards Reed. Reed then took the cap off the bottle and poured a liquid from the bottle all over the victim's head and body. Reed then attempted to ignite the liquid. Now, maybe the most harrowing part is the persistence. I mentioned this before, but when the victim fought back and ran, the complaint details what happened next. Reed then picked up the bottle that was now on fire, approached victim A, and lit victim A on fire using the bottle. Reed then ran to the front of the train car and stood watching victim A as her body was engulfed in flames. And finally, after his arrest, the complaint reveals a shocking detail about his demeanor. It notes that while in transit to the detective division, quote, Reed made repeated, spontaneous, and unprompted utterances, specifically yelling, "Burn B" and "Burn alive B." You have to imagine, if it's not even just the officers who are going to be key witnesses to that, body cam footage, dash cam footage, and there are more critical and frankly disturbing details that are embedded in this complaint that we haven't discussed yet. I'm going to keep reading. The complaint also details the immediate aftermath on the platform. It reveals a crucial, and for many, by the way, an infuriating detail about the response inside that train car, because it states, quote, victim A, who was almost fully engulfed in flames, attempted to extinguish herself by rolling on the ground of the train car. The train then stopped the Clark and Lake Street Blue Line platform, and victim A, while still on fire, was able to exit the train before collapsing on the train platform, where she was tended to by individuals on the platform. Now, according to the official complaint, she received help only after she managed to get herself off the train and onto the platform. And furthermore, the complaint provides a critical forensic link, because when Reed was arrested, he was apparently wearing the same clothes that he had on during the attack. But investigators didn't just note his clothing. They documented that he had, quote, fire-related injuries to his right hand. They also apparently found a key piece of evidence on him, a CTA transit card. The complaint notes that the card's transaction history shows it was used to board a Blue Line train at Kedzie and Congress at approximately 9:04 p.m. So that's just 1 minute after he was seen leaving the gas station. So to help us break down the potential legal strategy here, if there is one, the seemingly very powerful evidence that's laid out in this criminal complaint and more, I'm joined right now by Chicago trial attorney Andrew Scott. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time. Even before we get into the legal aspect of this, as somebody from Chicago, I got to ask you, this Blue Line, is this a safe line? Do you see crime here? Have you ever seen anything like this before, on that particular line, on that particular train? I mean, for all of us who are not in Chicago, tell us.
I would say of all of the L lines, the Blue Line is probably the most safe, what's considered the most safe. I've never seen any sort of attacks on the Blue Line. I know a lot of people have. I've certainly never even heard of an attack of this magnitude on not only the Blue Line, but any of the CTA L lines. So this is a pretty shocking experience for everyone in Chicago.
Yeah, it is shocking is the right word. Disturbing's another word. Really sick, really sick. I mean, this complaint.
Disgusting.
Yeah, this complaint methodically connects the gas station to the train platform, to the attack. There is this, CTA card I mentioned before. I have to ask, from a defense attorney point of view, does this feel relatively airtight by the prosecution? You also couple that with his alleged demeanor, right? These spontaneous utterances after the arrest, burn, bleep, his chaotic behavior in court. We'll talk about that too. But does it seem like everything is pretty much of an airtight case? I'm not really sure where a defense attorney would go here.
Yeah, this isn't going to be the type of case where you try to argue that he didn't commit the crime, right? You've got everything on video. So the strategy here is going to be one of two strategies. Either they're going to try to make some sort of insanity defense, which good luck with that. But based on what I've seen so far from this defendant, there might be some juice there. And then after that, it becomes attempting to reduce the amount of time your client is going to spend in prison. Now, this isn't a death penalty case, and although he's been charged in federal court, there is still a federal death penalty. So it's not the type of case where you're going to be trying to spare, your client's life. But this is the type of case that you take on, and as an attorney, you realize that your defendant, your client, I should say, you realize that your client is guilty. You're giving your client their constitutionally mandated best defense that you can give to help them out here. It's an airtight case for the prosecution.
For sure, for sure. I mean, if you talk about premeditation, if you talk about intent, the idea of captured on surveillance footage, filling up a gas bottle, wearing the same clothes, going onto the platform, going onto the train, allegedly dousing her, lighting her on fire. It's caught on surveillance. You maybe have key eyewitnesses as well, and then arrested wearing the same clothes. You mentioned the potential insanity defense. Look, I mean, talk to us about that, because this is just a random, sinister act of violence that makes absolutely no sense. And when I say that, you do wonder, someone could have mental health issues for sure, but that doesn't mean that they're entitled to a successful insanity defense. What do you think there might be there that's something that a defense attorney could work with?
Well, you're going to have, like you said, mental health issues. And if you look at this person's background, it's very clear that this person has pretty severe mental issues. And you're right. Does that mean that they're going to have a viable insanity defense? No, that does not mean that. Just because someone has mental health issues doesn't mean, or even severe mental health issues doesn't mean that they can't appreciate the wrongness of their actions. And that's going to be the high bar that the defense attorneys are going to have to tackle here. Is as crazy of an attack as it seems, it's also pretty hard to make the argument that this person didn't methodically plan out this attack. And obviously, the argument obviously knew that what they was doing was something that was wrong, that there was wrongness to these actions. Yeah. I think one of the things that's sort of fascinating about the world that we live in today is everything is on camera now. And he is probably on camera from arriving at the gas station to his entire walk to the L station to everything. So they're going to be able to, the prosecution is going to be able to show every step of the way on this case, most likely. And that is people are going to, the jury's going to be able to watch that and say, what is going on here? They're going to be able to see his movements. They're, in a lot of places, they're going to be able to see what he actually says. And they're going to be able to, by watching the crime, make a decision on whether this person appreciated the wrongness of the crime. And I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think it'll be successful.
And I want to get into the federal charge here and the fact that he has been hit with a federal charge, and we'll talk about that. But you put all the legal discussion to the side for a second and the shocking footage and the evidence. It is important to remember who is at the very center of this tragedy, the victim, 26-year-old Bethany MaGee. For days, she was known to the public only as Victim A. But as Newsweek reported, she has been identified as Bethany MaGee, a young woman whose life was brutally interrupted. We have learned that Bethany was a Purdue University graduate, an animal lover, a churchgoer. Her social media indicates that she's close with her parents and her brothers. Her father, Dr. Gregory MaGee, is a professor of biblical studies at Taylor University. It's a Christian college in Indiana. Her family has released a statement saying, "We would like to thank everyone for their prayers and well wishes as our daughter receives care for injuries sustained earlier this week. We are so grateful for the excellent care and support of the burn team at Stroger Hospital. We will not be providing updates at this time and ask for her and our privacy as we focus our attention on her and her recovery." Now, Andrew, let's talk about the human impact here, because now that we know a little bit more about Bethany and we're trying to grasp what happened to her and what her life is going to be, how does that humanize this case for a potential jury? And if you are a defense attorney, do you say to yourself, do you say to your client, this is not going to be good for you? The minute the jury sees what happened to her, this is going to be a problem for you.
You're going to say that to your client. You're going to say that this is going to be a massive problem for you. And there's a variety of reasons. First of all, like you said, she's a 26-year-old woman. There are people, a lot of the people who ride the L every day, which is going to be part of your jury pool, by the way. There's going to be plenty of people riding the L every day that are on your jury pool, are going to be people who look and feel just like her. People who are younger professionals coming in from various neighborhoods in the city. There's going to be people on that jury that are going to say that could have been me. But the other side of it too, or another aspect of it too, are burns are horrific injuries. I was trying to get as much of an update as possible as to the severity of her burns, and there isn't really a good one out there as far as I've seen. But I've handled burn cases before from a civil litigation side, and I can tell you, they're horrifying. There are months and months in the hospital. There's skin grafts involved. There's pain that's unlike any pain that you can imagine. And then there's scarring too, depending on how badly she was burned and where she was burned, where that scarring might be. So it's a horrible case that a jury is going to be able to put themselves in the shoes of that victim, and then they're going to see these horrible injuries. I mean, everyone's burned themselves before. And you think about how bad that little burn you get when you pull something out of the oven feels for a few days. Now imagine that all over your entire body, and imagine being in that for weeks.
It's difficult to grasp. It's difficult to understand. It's hard to understand. And the journey that she now has to go through after everything that she just went through, the journey that she has to go through, it's really, really unthinkable. And I got to say, I am wishing her a speedy and successful and healthy recovery, because as shocking as this is a new reality that she has to grasp. And it makes it go back to the family, right? How does a victim's family navigate this kind of trauma? How do they navigate the media attention that's being brought to this case? Because it is being talked about in all different circles, right? There's the political aspect, there's the criminal justice aspect, there's the legal aspect. It's just a shocking story. How does the victim's family navigate something like this?
I feel terrible for the victim's family, first of all, because their loved one has to go through this and they have to experience it with her. But the amount of attention that this case is going to get is going to exacerbate that pain. They're going to have people talking about this case for weeks, on cable news shows. It's going to be all over the internet, and they're going to be fighting misinformation. They're going to be fighting their privacy. Most people, when they experience a tragedy, they want privacy, and they're not going to get any, which is horrible. So it's a very difficult situation for the family. I really feel for them.
Yeah. And by the way, the U.S. attorney stated that she was, quote, minding her own business when this happened. So talk to me about this charge, right? You might read this and say, okay, what are the state charges that he's facing? No, he's hit with this federal charge, committing a terrorist attack against a mass transportation system. That was very deliberate to charge him with that because it carries life in prison. Were you surprised that he's charged with that federal crime, and how do you prove something like that?
I was a little surprised that he was charged with a federal crime, but then when you realize that it's on a mass transit system, that makes it more likely that they're going to be charged with a federal crime, right? How do you prove that case? How these statutes are generally written is they're written so the prosecutors can win these types of cases. And if you look at how the statute's written, you look at the evidence, I really think that it's going to be a very difficult situation for the defense to get any sort of a not guilty on this case. I would also be shocked if this case ends up going to trial. Now, there's always the wild card. We've seen or heard of some of how this defendant has acted in court. You can't force your client to take a plea deal, so he might insist on a trial, and it might be the type of case where this guy might run through multiple defense attorneys and it might end up being the type of case where he ends up representing himself because he seems that completely unhinged. So this is an awful case for a defense attorney to try to win or try to navigate. Like I said, the person who ends up taking this case isn't taking this case for money. They're not taking this case to win. They're taking it with the passion that they're going to say, okay, this person, despite the fact that he's guilty, deserves a fair trial, and I'm going to make sure that they get it.
Do you think, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, what his prior criminal history was? Do you think he's charged at the federal level to make sure that there is absolutely no chance that he ever gets out?
I'm not sure about that. I think that the charges sort of happened fast enough to where there was sort of the incident occurred, everyone was shocked, and the indictment came down. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it occurred on a mass transit system, and that's what makes it a charge where federal charges are available. I don't know if the idea is that this is put on this to make sure that he never gets out. Now, to your point, though. In Illinois state sentencing, if he were sentenced to, aggravated battery, which is what these charges would be in state court, even if it were a max severe penalty, he would basically get out in 50% of the time, depending on how he is in jail.
What about attempted murder?
Attempted murder could be, he's not going to get, you're right, he could be charged with attempted murder. And again, he would probably not see a life in prison. It could be, it still would be what people would be charged on this case, or the sentencing that he would get on this case on the state level would be the type of reaction where people go, that's not enough.
Well,
and you have to factor in the fact that, like I said, he gets 50%, he gets credit. So he's only going to end up serving half that sentence. On a federal level, he'll serve 85% of whatever sentence he gets. And that is a big part of this, is that even if he gets, 10 years or 20 years or 25 years or 40
this is life in prison. This charge is life in prison. Yeah. So
it could be life in prison.
It could be, but you're saying even if it's life in prison, there's a chance he could get out before at a federal level?
It depends on whether he's granted parole or whether it's life without parole. And that would be, I would have to look at, that would be a decision for the judge. He could, what could happen here is he could have an eligibility for parole in 20, 25, 35 years or something like that, assuming. Would he, we can't predict the future. He could go in and he could get completely rehabilitated and be fixed, and then, in 35 years, be granted parole. Or he could be what we think he's going to be and end up not getting that parole.
And look, he's 50 years old, but here's the point. Here's the point. The reason I've asked you, well, are they charging him at the federal level to make sure he never gets out? Let's talk about his criminal history, because if the details of this attack leave people asking how on earth could something like this happen, Let me tell you that the answer may lie in a staggering number that has ignited outrage, that has demanded a hard look at the criminal justice system. The number is 72. So according to court records, Lawrence Reed has been arrested at least 72 times over the past 30 years. I want to break that down. So according to a motion for detention that was filed by the government, of those 72 arrests, Reed has approximately 15 convictions, and 8 of those are felonies. His felony convictions include arson, criminal damage to government-supported property valued over $500, drug trafficking, drug possession, and a felony traffic offense. So I want to focus on the arson because it is a direct precursor to this alleged attack, right? The motion details an April 2020 crime where CTA workers saw Reed walking with 2 red gas cans. He apparently approached a window of the James R. Thompson Center, the state government building in downtown Chicago, poured liquid from the cans near the window, and ignited it, causing a fire. For this act, he was sentenced to probation in Cook County. The criminal damage convictions are also telling. So one involved him damaging 2 CTA train windows. Another involved damaging a computer that was property of the Cook County Department of Corrections. For these, he also received probation. Now, to the moment that makes the case so infuriating, at the time of this attack, Reed was already facing a violent felony charge. According to reporting from CBS News Chicago, in August, he was charged with aggravated battery causing great bodily harm for allegedly striking a social worker at the McNeil Hospital. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office objected to his release, arguing he was a danger, but you had a judge who ended up releasing him on electronic monitoring, and according to the motion for detention, another judge later modified the order, loosening his monitoring restrictions. And the federal motion notes that at the time of the CTA attack, Reed was required to be at home under curfew. Andrew, I really only have one question. How is this possible?
Well, the answer comes down to a few things. You know, a lot of his arrests and convictions are related to property damage crimes. They're not related to harming other people. And that's why he was out or was out from those types of charges. Those are, whenever you're damaging property over hurting people, you're going to be charged with, you're going to be given less time in prison or less time in jail.
And the 72 arrests don't matter?
Well, 72 arrests, but it's 15 convictions. You know, that's what it comes down to. That should be the number people are focusing on. 15 convictions is too many convictions, by the way. It's a lot of convictions, and 8 felonies is a lot of felonies. But it comes down to, can you put someone in jail for the rest of their life for destroying a computer or setting a fire to property? And I think on the scale of things, a lot of people, if they were looking at this, not considering what he did here, would say, okay, well, that's probably not a life imprisonment charge. Now, the attack on a social worker is a particularly interesting charge, and I'm somewhat surprised that he was actually given the ability to bail out, because those charges, whenever they're involving professionals, so to speak, those tend to carry a higher amount of weight. You know, they tend to be aggravated battery cases, because that's someone who is, this social worker was someone who was trying to help him, was in their professional role when they were injured. And that usually adds an aggravation factor, which you sometimes can be used to deny someone probation, right. or excuse me, not probation, to deny somebody bail under the Bail Act. And for whatever reason, a Cook County judge didn't see that way.
So when people read this and they say, wait a minute, he got probation even after his criminal history, gets released even after all this, does there need to be a change in the law in Chicago?
I don't know the answer to that, because the problem is with this type of case, it's random enough, and it's not as if he had the type of violent history that you could have predicted that he would commit this type of crime on a person. So the Bail Act, or the Bail Reform Act in Illinois, did a lot of good things, and a lot of people don't realize that. You know, to not hold somebody in jail for an offense that they effectively can't pay to get released is problematic. And what a lot of people don't realize is all bail is it's a monetary hurdle to getting out of jail. You don't go to jail until you're convicted of a crime. So if me and some billionaire are both arrested for the same crime, and they set our bail at $1 million, and I can't pay that $1 million, but the millionaire or the billionaire can pay that $1 million. The billionaire goes free and I don't go free. Who's more dangerous in that situation? You're not making an objective decision on who's more dangerous. You're making an objective decision on who can afford to get out of jail before they are convicted. Now, both people whenever you get out on bail, you still have to face trial, and you can still be sentenced to prison after the trial, and that's completely unrelated to bail. So it comes down to the fact that you are innocent until proven guilty, and you are only held before you are innocent until you're proven guilty based on certain conditions.
But look, again, you mentioned it before. There is a question here of why he was released if you're talking about a potential danger to the public or repeat offender. Look, in the wake of this attack, I want your perspective. In the wake of this attack, federal authorities, they held a press conference to formally announce the charges. And you had U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros, who went to the podium to immediately shut down any speculation that this was anything but a random predatory attack.
I've seen reports that there was an altercation or that there was some kind of disagreement or argument that took place. Those statements are inaccurate and false. She was on her phone.
Then you had ATF Special Agent in Charge Chris Ammon, who took the microphone and connected Reed's past directly to this present tragedy in honestly the most blunt terms possible.
Lawrence Reed had no business being on the streets given his violent criminal history and his pending criminal cases. Reed had plenty of second chances by the criminal justice system, and as a result, you have an innocent victim in the hospital fighting for her life. Because of the swift action of CPD, ATF, and our law enforcement partners, there will be no other chances for Mr. Reed. Thank you.
Andrew, we just heard this really stunning audio from the ATF agent. From your perspective, in the Chicago legal community, is it unusual for a federal official to so bluntly condemn the second chances that a defendant received in the state court system? And what does that signal to you about the federal government's approach here?
It's absolutely unusual. And what it does is it tells you that this is the type of shocking case that has gotten the feds involved. And when the federal government is involved prosecuting people, when the DOJ is involved in prosecuting people, they do not lose. They do not mince words. They are about as serious and as buttoned up as it becomes. These are the best prosecutors that exist, and that's how they get to this level. So for him to come out here and make these sort of statements, a lot of it is, in my opinion, somewhat political, but a lot of it has to do with the absolute shock of what we witnessed here, what happened to this poor woman.
But he's not wrong. I mean, look, here's the thing. The judge in the August case released him over the prosecution's objections and reportedly stated, quote, "I can't keep everybody in jail." What is this a situation where there's just not enough room to house everybody, and that's a reason why somebody like Reed is let out? Yeah, I hear you. He's innocent until proven guilty. I say it all the time, 100%. But with that criminal history, and given what he's accused of doing here, where the evidence is so strong, people are not going to want to hear that. And the question becomes, is that the case? There's just practically not enough room in Chicago housing facilities to house somebody who's accused of a crime like this? I mean, I can't keep everybody in jail. What does that mean?
Yes, first of all, you can't keep everybody in jail for a variety of reasons, and I think that first of all, they have to make the decision. The judge has to make the decision. How likely is this person to be a threat to other people? And when the judge made that decision, they did not think that this person would commit this type of crime. Now, does that decision look absolutely terrible in hindsight? Yeah, it looks horrible.
Yeah.
It looks absolutely horrible. And I would imagine that this judge has a very strong chance of not being retained the next time that they are up for reelection. But the human aspect of it too, I'm sure this judge feels absolutely terrible about what happened here. And that's a decision that judge made. That judge made on basis on, a court call that was in front of them, that it was hundreds and hundreds of cases, hundreds and hundreds of motions. The judge only had a certain amount of time to read everything they could about this case and made that decision. And guess what? It was a bad decision.
Look, there are no easy answers to this. It's incredibly frustrating, though. It is incredibly distressing, and it is so sad. It is so tragic. And I just will full circle here. Our thoughts, our prayers, our well wishes are with this young woman, her family, and I hope she has, again, a successful, healthy recovery, and this family gets the privacy that they need, and hopefully the justice that she's entitled to. Andrew Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.